And I'm going to go nice and slow because people can get confused. And it's a lot to kind of get your head around. So we're going to take it one bite at a time and understand this tribal nature of the Old Testament and how all that works. So this mini series or spinoff is called Meet Ephraim. And we're going to see how we get to Ephraim and the right hand blessing in small little segments. Let's go. So first of all, when is this and what the hell are we talking about? All right, we're going to go all the way back to Genesis, okay, the first book in the Bible. This is after Adam and Eve. This is after Noah and the flood. Okay, so all that's over. This is also after the Tower of Babel that Nimrod tried to pull off. So this is about 500 years-ish, give or take, after the Tower of Babel problem, where Nimrod tried to do the whole first New World Order thing, and God crushed that, okay? So this is also long before Moses and the Exodus from Egypt. What I call Exodus, I call that the road trip from hell. So Moses is not around yet, okay? So we're somewhere between Nimrod and Moses. And along comes the birth of the Hebrew nation. Now, when you say the word nation, modern people think of land borders, okay? Like the nation of Canada is a political land border place. Or, the nation of Israel, modern speaking. Or, the nation of Palestine, which is a whole nother mess. Or the nation of Saudi Arabia. Or the nation of the United States. That's not how the Bible is talking about nation, okay? In regard to the Hebrew nation. For the Hebrew nation, I want you to think, I can't really think of, anything but think of the National Football League. Okay. The nation doesn't have a nation. The people who are a part of the National Football League don't have their own borders. It's just a group of people that have something in common. Okay. Think of the Nation of Islam. All right. They're a group of people that have something in common. Okay. A common mission, a common purpose. All right. Well, Abraham is the dude who is the birth of the Hebrew nation, meaning a group of people who have something in common. And what is that something in common? It is not necessarily a ethnicity or a race or a piece of land. It is a quote unquote set apartness by God for a certain mission. This goes into divine election. These people, whether worthy or not, were specifically chosen by God to redeem humanity. Period. That's the nation. The Hebrew nation are usually divine people by divine election and or bloodline, okay, to keep that pure bloodline because we're back in the janky times, right? To birth a Messiah to redeem humanity. That's what Hebrew means. And these people have crossed over and are doing their mission and fulfilling their part in this long linkage of missions. That's what a Hebrew is. It is not a certain race of people. It is not a certain language. It's just people who have crossed over via divine election. And even within the bloodline, you're going to see that not everybody in the bloodline has divine election. Some people in the same bloodline do not have the divine election, and some people do. Okay? So Hebrew is more about election than it even is bloodline, although the bloodline does thread throughout. So think of nation in a league of people, if you will, rather than a land zone. That's where we're going to start. It is the misunderstanding, or not misunderstanding, let's say mispropagandizing of the word nation and the word Hebrew that's got us into the political mess that we're in today, because people do not understand biblical vocabulary. Okay. If you think of nation as land, welcome to the problems of the Middle East. Okay. This also gets us to the modern term goy or goyim. Modern Jewish people have taken the term goy to mean non-Jewish, but it isn't. It's non-Hebrew, meaning not of divine election within these people elected by God to carry out a certain mission. Okay. These people have not crossed over. They're not part of that line, that link, that chain link fence that goes from Abraham to Jesus. If they're not part of that, they might be in the bloodline, but they're not part of the plan. That would be non-Hebrew. Okay. So Hebrew, again, isn't necessarily a race, a language, or a bloodline, although the bloodline does come into play. So the term goy gets smaller and smaller and smaller before it gets hijacked into modern times. But it means non-Hebrew, anybody of other nations, other groups of people. Okay. So you could be an Israelite and still be goy. Because you're not Hebrew. But anyways, let's keep going. All right. Now, we're not getting here yet, but I want to mention this in case things pop up along the way. In the Old Testament, not as much in the prophets, but in, Chronicles, Kings, Samuel, those books, the books that chronicle the history of the kings of Israel and Judah, we begin to see some massive editorial problems. One of the massive problems is archaeology. When you dig into biblical archaeology, the first thing you're going to encounter is the giant wall of propaganda. And it's all about selling tickets and tourism to the biblical archaeology sites all over Jerusalem, basically, in Israel. Okay. But when you scratch the surface, what you begin to see is that most of the sites that sell the most tickets are in and around Jerusalem. And the archaeological finds that they have are things like, we found a Jewish coin that dates back to 500 BC. And everyone goes, wow. Here's the problem. 500 BC was Babylonian. What do you have before that? Nothing. Well, we have this wall, and we're going to call it the City of David. But probably don't really because the dates don't actually match up. But that's what we're going to call it. We think that Solomon's temple is under the Dome of the Rock, but we don't have absolutely any proof of it. But there's other temples that sort of, like they have horns on the thing too. So we know that the Bible didn't lie about having horns on the thing. So if there were horns on the tabernacle, then that means, and we found that in a different place, that means that when the Bible says there's horns on the tabernacle little thing, the ark in the temple, then the Bible didn't lie. So it said it was Jerusalem. So we assume it is. That's archaeology gets really fucking janky. And what you're going to find is when you look at dating and archaeological discoveries, Israel Antiquities refuses to dig in the sites of northern Israel. It only likes to dig in Jerusalem to prove the legitimacy of rulership from Judah and Jerusalem. But there's a whole ass site called Mount Elba that they will not look at. There is a whole site in Shiloh. They don't want to look at that. As a matter of fact, they tried to pave a 8-lane highway over Shiloh. which is one of the most important biblical places ever in the world. They're like, no, we don't care about that place. We're gonna put a highway over it. Like, it's bad, you guys. It's bad. And when you begin to get all these artifacts that everyone is oohing and eyeing, you find out that 99% of them all lead back to post-Babylonian Jerusalem. They're not King David Jerusalem, and there's absolutely zero evidence that King Solomon even fucking existed, never mind built a temple in Jerusalem. So I have no evidence of a temple of Solomon being built in Jerusalem or around Jerusalem. They've got no evidence that David brought the tabernacle to Jerusalem, the Ark of the Covenant. They have no evidence of really anything. anything before Babylon. There's no evidence. What there is evidence of is that the northern kingdom, from the tribe of Dan, really, really far in the north, all the way down through to like the tribe of, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Benjamin, which are kind of right on the border of Judah, like in the south. So from way in the north, all the way to the south, all through Moab, all through Edom, what they have is booming metropolis cities that were doing great in trade. And they had these giant chariot stalls for their stallions, for their armies. And they had evidence of grain silos. And they had evidence of farming and agriculture and moving water. And they have evidence of receipts from like trade with the Phoenicians. So like the north was rolling. And what do they have in Judah before Babylon? Nothing. Nothing. They have maps from like, the topography of the time, which showed that it was going down to the coast. It was like a huge cliff that just dropped off and it was rocky and dangerous and it didn't help trade. Whereas in the north, it had this gently sloping hills that went down and was easy to get to the coast for trade. But in Judah, it was treacherous and you couldn't get from the desert to the ocean because there's this giant craggy ass rocky mountains in the way. There's no fishing in the Dead Sea, just saying. Massive desert land. It's now called the Negev, and you can still see that today. There's nothing between Jerusalem and Egypt. It's all fucking wasteland desert. That's how it was. And then the hills of Jerusalem, quote unquote, was this rocky, rocky soil, mountainous hamlet of maybe a couple thousand people, like a village. It wasn't a giant kingdom until after Babylon. So then what you see when you look at the archaeology part, not the biblical account, but just archaeology, you see the northern kingdom rise and do really great and then get wiped out by the Assyrians. And then a lot of people from the north start to move to the south, running from the Assyrians. A bunch of shit happens. And then the rise of the south starts after the north is already destroyed. Dun, dun, dun. So that's one thing. The next thing you learn is there is what we call Davidic editors. And they like to redact a bunch of stuff. Sort of like when you get a CIA document and they give you 3 words and then 5 lines of like blacked out marker and then another 2 words and then blacked out marker. Welcome to the Davidic editors. These are editors that, let me just tell you what basically happened, okay? The kings come back, or the elites come back from Babylon. And the kings and priests need to control the people. And they want to instill pride in the people. And because Judah was a podunk nothing town that accomplished nothing, they took the history and the dates and the accomplishments of northern Israel, attached that to Judah, kind of pitched their cart to that horse, and made it their history, ruling the entire kingdom from Jerusalem. They're like, yeah, remember those big magical cities? Oh, that was us. That was us from Washington, D.C. that did that for you. And so they had to go back into the text. There's one king, his name is Josiah. Ezra did this too, but King Josiah is really to blame on this one. He found in the second temple, he found a copy supposedly of the Deuteronomy, book of Deuteronomy, the Deuteronomy scroll. And in the book of Deuteronomy, it talks all about how God chose this certain place. So in Deuteronomy, it constantly says the house of God, the place God chose. All of these sort of vague references, and all of those places automatically become Jerusalem. So anytime in the Old Testament, just like they changed Lord and God, right? And they took all the names out for the different gods and made it all Lord. Well, they took the place God chose and made it Jerusalem. They took the house of God and made it Jerusalem. They took the word for temple and made it Jerusalem. They took the word for the house of the temple and made it Jerusalem. So now you're reading and you're going, wait. David was literally just having dinner 400 miles to the north, and suddenly he's back in Judah, in Jerusalem. Like, that's not possible unless he's got his private jet. So you start to see these weird references to Jerusalem, and you're like, wait a minute. Jerusalem wasn't established yet. Like, they don't have a Jerusalem yet. There's a Judah, this podunk backwater, but there's no Jerusalem yet. And they pull it off because they've got Kings, Samuel, and Chronicles out of order. And then they put the prophets, and then they put the other prophets in there. Like Micah. Micah is the very last prophet in the Old Testament before you get to Matthew. But here's the problem. Micah was a prophet way the fuck back. He's like one of the first fucking prophets. So he should be first in the Old Testament. So it's so out of order and backwards that people can't figure out who's coming and going. And then they slip in the word Jerusalem all over the place. And you just assume that's what's happening. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. They did that post-Babylon. So you've really got to get through all those edits. We're not doing that this time. But I want you to know, if we're pulling some text from the Old Testament, and I say something like, we're going to not call that Judah right now because there's a reason for it, and I can do that, but we're not going down those rabbit holes, okay? There is also a giant Chronicles problem. All right, you've got Kings and Chronicles, and well, Samuel too. And these set of books are talking about the kings and the Davidic Empire, okay? So one of them is an account of these kings, including David and Solomon. Chronicles comes along and writes our side of the story account to go back and clarify some shit that Kings and Samuel didn't quite get right. So you're reading along in Samuel and you get a story about David. And then you read the same thing. It's like a doublet. Okay. You read the same thing in Chronicles, but the story's a little bit different. The genealogy is a little bit different. And you're like, what the fuck's going on here? That's because these Babylonians came back and wrote Chronicles from a Davidic Jerusalem perspective. So you're not going to get this genealogy of David in Samuel or Kings. The only place you're going to get it is in Chronicles. And then you dig into Chronicles and like every single scholar's like, yeah, that's some bullshit. That's not really how it goes. Like the third part of the genealogy is accurate, but like the other parts, that can be proven wrong all over it, the place. So they jankified it. So Chronicles is a really bad place to go to prove any of your points. And usually when they're talking about David, they go to Chronicles. For some reason, they don't like to go to Samuel. No, they go to Chronicles. And that becomes a big problem because Chronicles has been over and over proven to not be the place to go because it was written by kings post-Babylonian Jerusalem with a political, religious, and ideological agenda. There you go. Just imagine if you gave the Bible to, well, they did, to Trinitarians and had them rewrite it. Okay, if you said, okay, Trinitarians, you can just rewrite shit and add a book to the Bible. Imagine what they would do with the Logos if they were given the opportunity to rewrite those scrolls. Well, that's what happened with Chronicles. Okay, and it hugely impacts the stories of David, the timeline, the genealogies, and who's going where, and it just doesn't make sense. And most people don't catch it because they're like, oh, they were in Gersum, or they were in, they were in Horeb, and then he's in, I don't freaking know. He goes up to Shiloh, and then he's down in Ephraim, and then he's over in Horeb, and people are like, I don't know where the Gilgad, and people are like, I don't fucking know where these places are, so they just skip it. But again, that's not the place to skip, because you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So we'll get to all that eventually. All right, just to give you an idea of how much this is screwed up, we're going to go ahead and click this. This is an article that they think is great. Sure, this tab instead. They're actually bragging about this, and I find it quite sus. But this is the 70 names of Jerusalem. This is a fun one. So, biblically speaking, when you see any of these words, we just make it all Jerusalem. So you've got this word, Shalem. That would not be Salem or Shiloh. No. It means at peace. And so since the word means at peace, where Abraham and Melchizedek was, that has to be Jerusalem. It's not. It's Shiloh. This one is Moriah. That one. The Temple Mount. Oh, there it is. It's Abraham goes there. That's in Jerusalem. Abraham's right there in Jerusalem. Oh, Jebus. These are the guys, the Jebusites, that David, King David beat this tribe, these indigenous people, if you will. So Jebus, these are like the Jebusites. These are the names of the tribes that lived in the area of Judah when the land was being established, and the people of Judah were not able to beat the Jebusites until David came, and he beat this clan of people, these indigenous people in the land. But that means that's a fortress, and that's from David, and that's Jerusalem. The threshing floor from Ruth. Then we have Zion. The name of Zion actually means Jerusalem. The Lion of God is Jerusalem. The city of David doesn't really mean the city of David. It means Jerusalem. The Lord sees. Oh, that means Jerusalem. The city of the holy place, that means Jerusalem. There's no other holy place ever in the whole Bible, just Jerusalem. Betula, virgin, that means Jerusalem. Sought after, valley of vision. So all of Guy Hazon, that's Jerusalem too. Gila is Jerusalem. The city of God. So when David's talking about the city of God in Psalm 87, of course he's talking about Jerusalem. And when we're talking about the city of truth from the prophet Zechariah, this translates to Jerusalem. And just when it says city, when Ezekiel's just talking about the word city, the prophet Ezekiel, of course, that one's Jerusalem too. You guessed it. There's no other city but that one. When we're talking about the city, the city of David's encampment, well, that's got to be Jerusalem. In Isaiah, the prophet talks about the faithful city. Well, that can't be in the north of those heathens. That's Jerusalem. The paragon of beauty, that's Jerusalem. The oasis of justice that Jeremiah talks about. Now, let me tell you, if you read the whole context of prophet Jeremiah, he ain't calling Jerusalem no oasis of justice. He's calling it a snake pit, just like Jesus did, but not according to Israel. According to Israel, the oasis of justice that Jeremiah was referring to, that would be Jerusalem. My tent is in her. My tent is in her. Where's her? Well, that's Jerusalem. The rock of the plain from Jeremiah. That's also Jerusalem. Forget the fact that when they came over across the Jordan River and put down their rock in Shiloh and Gilead, and we're having all of those battles in the north across from even higher than the Moabites, like way up there. And this was the meeting place that everybody did, and everybody put a rock down, and it's a place called Gilead. Forget that. Forget that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Jerusalem. The city united together, of course, is Jerusalem. The city of the dove is Jerusalem. Palace. Palace means Jerusalem. The wife of the youth is Jerusalem. Also a house of prayer. There is no other house of prayer except Jerusalem. The married women are all in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is fruitful. Jerusalem's also the hill of frankincense. It's important. The garden of God, the gateways of nations, the south. So the whole south is Jerusalem. The high mountain is Jerusalem because, there's no Mount Horeb or Mount Ebal or Mount Jalawaz. Just Jerusalem. The mountain of myrrh, the mountain of assembly, the holy mountain, the lofty mountain, just all the fucking mountains. They're all Jerusalem. Dwelling, I delight in her, the navel of the world. Friendship, God is there. Forest of the South. Now that one's funny. When we learn about the forest of the South, that's Jerusalem. No, it isn't. Beautiful vista, bride, seat of God, pasture, field of grain, rest, fortress, temples, peak, joy of the world, portion, inheritance, heritage, paradise, city of righteousness, city of God, unabandoned city, barren woman, the great city of the great king, great among the nations, great with people, the ewe, or the sheep, the female ewe with Rachel. That's funny that Rachel is Rachel's north. All right, heights, light of the world, forested field, and the princess among countries. That's only page 6. Your feedback matters. Let them know. Let them know what you think. So all of that is Jerusalem. So yay. And there's so many biblical verses. They even quoted all of our prophets to let you know that they were talking about Jerusalem. If you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. Yeah. So that is the result of our lovely redactors. Okay. That's just one example. So in looking at Israel versus Judah, it's not as cohesive and growing together as they would want you to think. You're going to see a lot of these doublets, just like we did in Genesis with the creation story. And your names, this is why they had to script the names, because you've got your, Yohe-Vahe, Jehovah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, and El Elyon, Elohim, all of those. And they're conflicting from the north and the south. So we just made it all Lord. Not to mention all of the minor gods and demons. They just made all that Lord too. So you don't know who's coming or going. In the 600s is a giant that's when the Babylonian edits begin with these guys like Ezra and Josiah. So just know that background. People don't like to hear it, but it's how it is. Now that we got that out of the way, we're going to go and start talking about, and I just wanted to put that out there first in case I do go into the Old Testament and pull text from you and you see weird referring to Jerusalem and I'm like, yeah, that wasn't there yet. Just know that it's an edit and it's out of place and we'll get there eventually. We will be back with Abraham next and start our lineage of quote unquote Hebrews. See you soon.